Yes, government is supposed to provide transport for school children. Yes, we're supposed to have efficient systems and means for kids to go to school, but we're also missing the main points to say this is what we are in and facing every day.
We have to encourage social responsibility, which is a continuous in empowering communities to become active citizens and demand accountability.
We need to, as South Africans, start having a bottom-up approach and a people-centered approach when it comes to development. We can speak about saving and so forth. We actually need to speak about the economic liberation of people. We need to speak about them actually being economically enhanced and advanced to even have means to save.
But I honestly feel that we still don't know how to manage money.
When we speak about where I would like to see, women in the next 20 years, or how I'd like to conceive of women and the feminist agenda in 20 years from now. Honestly, it's just a matter of seeing women's rights as human rights.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the FW de Klerk Foundation's Women's Day Roundtable. We're here with very special guests, and we're here to talk about women, our empowerment, our issues, our liberation, and everything in between. My name is Thando Malinga. I'm at the Constitutional Advancement Program for the FW de Klerk Foundation, and I'm here with my colleague, Amirah. And we just like our two guests to please introduce themselves. Please tell us which organization you work for and what Women's Month means to you.
I'm Nadia Adam. I'm an event planner by profession, but I also I run the FAB Foundation, which is an organization that handles all sorts of social issues, mostly with widows, people that have been struggling with GBV or orphanages, general just social development around SA and anywhere else that needs help.
Hi guys, my name is Kamvakazi Myataza. I'm a woman of many hats, I would say, but I think right now I'm joining the capacity of a board member of Project Youth South Africa. And what Women's Month means to me, I think Women's Month is a moment of reflection, proud reflection, looking back on what has been achieved and moments where, previous generations would have thought were unachievable, but they attained. But it's also a moment of dwindling hope for South Africans in the contemporary context of women and the status quo and so forth. So it is a bit of a bittersweet, I think, moment of the whole month of Women's Month for me and my reflection. And yeah, I guess we'll go into it as we proceed with the course. Thank you.
That's so amazing. You guys are doing incredible things. So I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Amirah Hassim, and I am an intern as part of the Constitutional Advancement Program in the FW de Klerk Foundation. Today we're hosting this Women's Month podcast/roundtable. So I'm just going to give you guys some background as to why we're hosting this. And then I'm going to just dive into the first question for you guys to feel free to answer. So South Africa's women have stood at the front lines of every social transformation, from liberation struggles to today's fights against poverty, violence, and inequality. Yet women remain among the most affected by our nation's failures, from girls walking kilometers for water, to single mothers holding entire households on their backs, to women in power constantly negotiating visibility and respect. So this Women's Month, the FW de Klerk Foundation invited you guys to lead a bold and honest conversation about what it truly means to empower women, not just through policy, but through shifting mindsets, systems, and power structures. So that's what this roundtable will lean towards. So for our first question, it's based off of mindset as a catalyst for change. So I'm going to start with a quote. South Africa is not a poor country. It is a poorly managed country, trapped in the prison of its own thinking. That was by Moletti Mbeki. So in post-apartheid South Africa, the laws changed, but the mindset didn't always follow. While we celebrate freedom on paper, the psychological residue of violence, control, and patriarchy still lingers in homes, schools, and relationships. We live in a country where every 3 hours a woman is murdered, and more than 60% of children grow up without a father figure. These are not just policy failures, they are indicators of deeply ingrained mindset around power, gender, and responsibility. A son raised to see his mother suffer in silence may grow to expect the same from his wife. A boy raised by a community that never speaks about healing may become a man who breaks others instead. So the question we pose to you guys is, how do we shift the national mindset from domination to empathy, from masculinity as violence to masculinity as protection? What role must schools, faith, storytelling, and youth play in rewriting South Africa's cultural script for men and women alike?
I think when we think of South Africa and the violence that our women kind of endure in this country, it's very difficult to ingest, especially with statistics where every three minutes a woman goes through a form of gender-based violence. So it's very scary to know those statistics and still live as a woman and thrive as a woman in this country. I think more than anything, we need to, as a country, as a constitution, teach our men how to treat women, but also defend and teach our women to defend themselves against the society of inequality and danger that we find ourselves in.
Okay, I think I've thought about this, and I think we need to go back. We need to step back before we start with all of this. There's something that always bothers me when I see kids not in school. And if you drive around, like I live in the south of Johannesburg, if you drive around at any time of the day, there's kids outside asking for money at the filling stations. There's kids outside, or at the robots. You'll see lots of children stopping and begging. They obviously get involved with the Nyaupe guys, and then these kids get part of that group. And it bothers me when children are not in school, and it's fine for you'll see a child with its mother begging on the side of the road, and the police will just be like, not, they won't care that there's a child that should be in school, instead of being standing on the side of the road begging, or they're not in school, but they should be in school. So I think we need to make more of an effort with getting children in school, making sure that it's not legal for them to be wandering around the streets during the day. If we can get all those kids that are walking around in schools, that's already getting rid of half of the problem, because the kids that are on those streets are going to end up as drug addicts. And that's a known fact, that all of these kids begging on the side of the road get into the wrong crowd, end up injecting themselves, end up stealing, because they need to feed themselves. I mean, if someone's hungry, they're going to steal, they're going to rob, they're going to do these things because they're desperate. You don't blame a hungry person. So I feel we should start by getting kids in school. If we can go a step further, I always feel that the social grants that we give in this country are a way of enabling people to just have more kids. And we need to revisit that. Yes, we don't want children starving, but it has to be capped at, say, 3 kids, because some of these poor moms are just having their 5th and their 6th and their 7th kid just to have access to that social grant every month. And I just feel like our government needs to do more, screen families. Okay, fine, you allowed to only have 3 kids. Only 3 kids can be on the social grant. You cannot have more children, because then we have to find other ways of supporting these children. Because when you're having 6 and 8 children, and then you're like 60 years or you're like 50 years old, you can't see the kids. Like, I mean, I live in the South. We'll have random kids coming, knocking on the door like they 11 and 13. Where's your mom? No, we live with our grandmother. My mom's not alive, or my granny's, we only live with our grandmother. And the grandmother is like 68 or 70 years old. She can't work. She can't feed them. So these are the things like I love, like, I mean, there are informal settlements around me, and I have lots of these kids. And I'm not that person that's going to be, okay, just here's something. I question them. Why do you not have school shoes? Why aren't you at school? Where's your mother? Where's your father? No, our parents are gone. So this is the thing, like, we need to go back and see how are these kids being raised. Some of them are like surviving. They're literally surviving. They don't have access to food, to education. And if we can just start from the bottom, if we can make sure these kids have a decent advantage in life, everything will change.
I totally agree with what you're saying. Kamva, do you have anything to add on?
Just wanted to circle back to what you had initially said in your preamble to the question, Amirah. Speaking about mindset and the role that our mindset as a country and as individuals also has on sort of destabilizing the systems of patriarchy and advancing women and women's rights. I think when you say that, it takes me back to, I think a few weeks ago, there was an incident in the news where a young girl on her way to school, of course, because there was no school transport, walking kilometers on end to get to school, a story that we're all familiar with. On her commute to school, she gets sexually violated by a man, right? And obviously this will create outrage, right? And commentary from all different parts of society, all different stakeholders. But I think what really stuck to me on this one particular person's commentary was a community member from that said community, and his concern more than anything, and what this story that was being covered was looking at, is government failure with regards to providing safe transport for kids to be able to commute to school, which is a valid ask and a valid argument. But what really stuck to me is him saying, had government ensured that proper transport is provided for kids, this wouldn't have happened, which I think is quite problematic, because had men not been sexual violators, this wouldn't have happened. So it completely misses the point to say, yes, government is supposed to provide transport for school children. Yes, we're supposed to have efficient systems and means for kids to go to school, but we're also missing the main points to say, this is what we are in and facing every day. Had that kid been in a transport, yes, on that particular day, they might have not been sexually violated, but we don't know what would have happened when they got to school. We don't know what would have happened when they get home. We don't know, we can't ensure their safety in those spaces. So it goes to say that we've sort of normalized gender-based violence. We've sort of normalized these things happening to young people, that we find every other excuse rather than sitting down and saying, listen, guys, this is actually a problem. This child was violated, yes, because there was no transport, and it's unfortunate that they had to walk all that distance to get to school. But there are men who are creeping at every point, at every corner, waiting for the perfect opportunity to violate us as women. And if we don't speak about that, and if we don't say it, we need to understand that things can happen in multifold. It's not only one or the other. So if our mindset is just going to jump straight to saying, oh, let's keep them safe from who and what, our mindset has to say that we also need to be very truthful and bold and honest to say that man, irrespective of government failures when it comes to the education and transport department, that man who have violated that child had no right to, had no reason to. And it's for us to also shine light upon that, to say this should never happen and this mustn't happen. So why I say it goes back to what you were saying, Amirah, about mindsets, is that, we've completely, that the whole point of a young child going to school being sexually violated has been missed in that commentary, has been missed in that story, because the focal point is the transport and education, which, yes, are valid, but it says to me that as a society and as individuals, we've now normalized gender-based violence. We've now normalized oppression against young women and women across society. So I think it's very important for us to go back and circle back to say, what can we do and what should we be doing, right? We need to go back to understanding what patriarchy is, how it affects each and every single one of us, not only us as women, not only young girls that are going to school, but we need to understand what we mean when we speak about women empowerment. We need to understand that when we say women empowerment and destabling the patriarchy, we're not only referring to us who can't walk safely at night. We're also talking about the little boy who can't speak up because they feel that as a man they cannot cry out loud. They need to carry their burdens. We're also speaking to the little boy who's getting touched by their uncle at home, but they can't speak about it because the masculinity that we are taught and the masculinity that patriarchy sort of allows is a masculinity that says you must be tough and you cannot speak. So we need to really, really go back to mindset. We need to really, really go back to the ground basis to say, what is patriarchy? What is masculinity in the contemporary context? And how do we problematize it? Further from problematizing it, how then do we resolve to creating a more healthier masculinity for everyone involved in society, essentially?
Yeah, I completely agree with 100% of what you're saying. And, it's so insane because when you actually start digging into it and doing research, you realize that when there's more than a certain number of people participating in certain action or thinking in a certain way, it's no longer just one or two people. It contributes to becoming a whole culture. In South Africa, we have a gender-based violence culture, and we don't have people who are going and saying, okay, why is this happening? What is making these people think in the way that they do that makes them then act on these impulses, and how is it that we can then stop those things? But yeah, it just goes back to the main question, which was, how can we really use mindset as a catalyst for change? So also with regards to what Nadia said, every child needs to be in school 100%. We also know that we have a government who's not reliable enough to be putting all of our kids in school. So how can we then shift the mindset of the people who are in the underprivileged areas and informal settlements to say, let's get our kids educated, whether it be at home or whether it be at a school? How do we then take education towards the villages, using that as something to say, okay, let's give each person skills in this area and let's take it forward from there.
One thing else that I wanted to say, so there's something that would just simplify everything. It says hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
If we can go back to having people not being hurt, and then maybe these people won't hurt other people in the future. I feel that every area needs a community center or a safe haven for kids. If the schools can't do better, then these NGOs should actually go into the community, set up these community centers where kids can come and get psychologists or therapists to come and do voluntary work, have them do learn skills, a sort of just a space for these kids to keep themselves busy, and if they need to give them whatever assistance they need emotionally, I just feel like we focus our community, and this is what I feel. There's so much focus put on IQ, but not EQ. And if we can just do a bit more with emotional intelligence as well, these kids will then maybe be a bit like that. It gives them skills because they have no examples to live by. There's probably adults in the home that are not present. I mean, we have an issue with alcoholism in our communities. There won't be money for anything, but there's money for alcohol, and it's the greatest root of evil in our communities. I mean, my daughter works in healthcare, and when it's end of the month, it's knife wounds, stab wounds. Like the hospitals are brimming with people that are just part of we have a violent culture. So the thing is, we need to go back to the roots. It's no sense treating this 29-year-old or a 30-year-old guy when he's done so much of damage by the time he reached 30 years old, and then he's going to continue the cycle with his children, and then his children are going to continue the cycle. We have to break the cycle. And the only way we're going to break it is to go back to the start and say, okay, let's raise these kids, let's put a bit more effort into our children, and then they become better adults.
I fully agree with you. I think the point you made on not having examples is such a big issue in our country because they don't have anyone to follow, and that's how they get recruited into gangs and so easily intertwined with them because they end up feeling like this is where they belong. This is a sense of home for them, or someone to take them in, kind of thing.
I just wanted to say, and just to add on our speakers' comments as well, I think I love what both of you guys are saying in terms of focusing on where our youth starts, educating our kids from a young age how to deal with the mindset of gender-based violence. It's very, very important. It's very important to deal with those psychological areas in primary school, kindergarten, kids knowing how to keep themselves safe, but also knowing not to perpetuate these things as they grow into society. But I think also another thing is that when we think of GBV and women getting harmed, whether it's sexually, emotionally, corporately, it doesn't just stay in the lower and disadvantaged communities. I think GBV is throughout all the classes. It's in the middle classes, the upper classes, in the elite. I think with what Kamva was saying, GBV and patriarchy perpetuates these ideas that men are able to treat women less, whether it's with the workplace. There's a lot of cases of sexual harassment in corporate areas in South Africa, and there's a lot of cases of domestic violence in middle class and upper middle class areas in South Africa where women are beat up by their husbands, killed. These stories don't just happen where there's disadvantaged communities. And I feel as well with what Nadia said, hurt people do hurt people. And I think in our disadvantaged communities, there are big cultures of violence. There's a huge culture of violence. There's a huge culture of unstable households, which then leads to frustration, which then leads to women getting hurt and killed, and just crime, going out of control. And especially because, again, with the mind state of our men in this country, the toxic masculinity that is rooted within our cultures and within the patriarchy. We also live in a country where women are making it more than men are in terms of education. They're getting more jobs and all of that, and men are feeling resentful of those things. So there's a lot of intersections when it comes to thinking about GBV in all the classes and throughout South Africa, even from the youth all the way to, there's a lot of grandmothers who are susceptible to GBV as well, from their grandkids and the uncles that are
Wow.
in the houses. So I think in as much as I completely agree with you guys, I think we also need to be open that GBV is across the board throughout, all our sectors in society. It's a very huge socioeconomic problem for us here in South Africa. But as I continue with the next question, there's a lot of GBV obviously happening in areas where there are disadvantaged communities. In areas, there's a lot of women who are suffering in these communities. For example, a lot of kids who have to walk 5Ks to school, a lot of children who don't even have sanitary pads for when it's their time of the month. And how do we bridge that gap of caring for the women in disadvantaged communities and not leaving them behind in a space where we are speaking of GBV?
Okay, I prepared an answer for this question because I thought it was really important as well. So, are we building a future only for the urban elite? Right now, yes, 100%. I feel our feminist progress is measured in the boardrooms, parliaments, and hashtags. That's important, but it leaves rural women invisible. A woman walking 5 kilometers for water or giving birth without a clinic nearby does not experience empowerment the same way an urban professional does. If our victories don't reach her, then we are building a future for the elite, not for all women. This has been the reality and will continue to be the reality, not only in South Africa, but globally. So how do we change that? How do we include rural women as architects of their own liberation? We need to meet them where they are and give them the tools to shape their futures. One cannot engage with rural women as they would a CEO or someone in an urban area because there's a divide in valuing each other's experiences. This means literacy and compulsory skills development programs so rural women can engage fully in economic and political life. Road shows by labor departments and employers, especially in farming and domestic sectors, to ensure rural women know their rights and can claim them. Then grassroots school programs that invest in girls early so they don't inherit the same cycles of exclusion. We need platforms for rural women's cooperatives and unions to be heard in national debates, not as charity cases, but as equal partners. When we invest in these practical steps, rural women stop being spoken about and start being heard as leaders in their own right. That's how we move from feminist theory to feminist justice.
Very impressive.
Thank you for that.
I had time, and I just said, let me this was important for me because I'm a Limpopo girl and I grew up in a rural community, and it's something that I feel really strongly about. I mean, I go home and nothing's changed from like 30 years ago. They still in the same way. They're jumping taxis at 5 a.m. to get to like Zanin, and then most of them work as domestics. Yes, there's some of them that are working, but nothing's really changed in the rural areas.
Yeah, completely agree with you. Kamva, do you want to add anything on or
Yes,
say anything?
thank you, Amirah. So I think when we speak about the rural-urban divide and speaking about progress and lack thereof, I think it's the progress or lack of progress within women within rural areas is unsurprising because it speaks to generally the lack of progress within the rural community, so it's characteristic of what's happening in terms of development within South Africa. We have sort of this we're happy to term things as a rural urban divides, but we don't do anything about it, right?
Yeah.
So that's where I think the first problem begins. And then when we do that, we then become, as people who form part of the urban, we then become custodians of knowledge. We become the solution makers, and we sort of theorize all these things and so forth. But in the process, we're still leaving out the people within the rural areas. We're still leaving out the people that are majorly affected by these things and so forth. We sit in, in our discussions, and we say, oh no, this needs to be done, that needs to be done, and whatever the case may be. But we don't have people from those areas participating in those conversations. We don't have people in those areas saying, this is actually what we need and this is what we would like to see. Because the thing with oppression and the thing with gender is that these things are not monolithic and they're not consistent throughout. So something that I may deem as oppression, as Kamvakazi, who lives in an urban area, may be different for someone else who's in a rural area, and the priorities and levels of oppression might not be the same. So I can then sit maybe as a development specialist or whatever the case may be, theorizing and saying, no, I went to this place, I assessed, this is what's wrong and this is what needs to be done. But that may not be the priorities of the people within that community specifically. So what we need to do is generally we need to engage stakeholders. The stakeholders that we speak of and the stakeholders who we want development with, they need to be engaged in every part of the process. We need to, as South Africans, start having a bottom-up approach and a people-centered approach when it comes to development. We can't be quoting textbooks. We can't be looking at years and years old theories of development and so forth, when the people are right there, they can tell us what is wrong, what needs to be done, and then we have them as part of that process, you know what I'm saying? So I think we're very much happy to say that there's an urban and there's a rural, but at what point do we say, let's find a middle ground? Let's find a ground that doesn't further marginalize these people, because then that's an us and them. When there's us and them, there's more who have power and those who don't have power. There's those who have knowledge and then those that don't have knowledge. And it just creates, in as much as we're trying to then sort of mitigate gender issues, but it creates a sort of elitist approach to development, and it infantilizes people that you are attempting to sort of empower. So I think that's very important outside, like with gender, of course, because I think another thing in society that we forget is that we need to take everything, whether it's poverty, whether it's access to health, whatever the case may be, all these socioeconomic and societal issues, we need to apply a gendered lens to everything, because everything is gendered at the end of the day. And when we miss that gendered lens is then when we miss taking women along with us, and women as well as other groups within the development process and empowerment process. So I think it needs to start with our language, is I think where I'm also going. It needs to start with our language, how we characterize these things and how we see these things, and take people along with us. Yeah.
I think it's really so difficult. Like when you think about it, we wouldn't even know where to start, because in rural areas they struggle with water. Like a basic thing like water is a challenge for them every day. Like I know where they have to they have to actually go and carry water. And this is not when I'm saying, I know like people in Limpopo that have to go to the water gets cut off, and there's so much of corruption because now there's this business of people with their water tankers. I don't know if you guys heard about it.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like the monopoly at the moment where they're making people buy water. So there's issues with the water supply because now people have to purchase water constantly. So the thing is, it's so difficult. Like, how do we go forward when when they don't have the basics? If you're struggling with a basic need like water, are you going to worry about your child's, like the future of your children's education, because you're struggling to just get water? Your kids have to get up early in the morning to go and get the water. So the thing is, like, how do we like progress if they just don't have basic
Yeah.
amenities? And then another thing I thought about, based on Kamvakazi's point, why can't we engage with the chiefs of the villages, or the tribal leaders, and sort of have these discussions and engage with the tribal leaders and get women's organizations to then speak to the tribal leaders, and then have these discussions and include the tribal leaders, so that they can sort of talk to the men in the community and start educating them about GBV and all of these kind of issues. I don't know if it's done, but this is just something that I thought about.
I think imperative what Kamvakazi is saying, that we do need a people-based approach, especially in rural areas, especially with the urban divide, because with the government and the environment that people are living in rural areas, of course, it's the government that has not necessarily constituted development there. But when we look at our constitution, everyone has a right to simple, necessities like water, like housing, like safety, and especially women in our country. And I feel as though people and communities need to come together and necessarily close these gaps and protect women and protect the girl child, and not only the girl child, but children in general. And we do need to, as communities, as NGOs, as you're saying, Nadia, come together and genuinely make sure that women also feel empowered, because you cannot feel empowered when you're living in an environment that is not dignified at all. And I think that's what I feel the government sometimes misses, is that it's not giving people even a sense of dignity. And I think even when we're looking at rural areas, sometimes in rural areas, yes, people have to walk 5 kilometers to school, and all these other disparities. They don't have access to healthcare and education, which is terrible. But even in the urban areas, our urban areas are filled with informal settlements, and people are living in such close proximity to each other that women, for example, a girl child or women living in an informal settlement, the bathrooms are at the perimeter of the informal settlement. They have to now leave in the middle of the night, go to those porta potty bathrooms, and whether they're on their period, whether they are, just using the bathroom at any time of the day, are faced with so many dangers. And that's why we've got such high rates of GBV. So I think it's up to the communities now to stand together, because the government in the past 30 years, like you are saying, Nadia, there hasn't been much, closing of that gap, closing of that economic gap that we've seen. So it's quite scary. It's quite scary living in South Africa as a woman and having to deal with all these things. Amirah, but please lead us into the next question.
I will. I think my answer is going to be a little bit more from like an economic background, but I keep coming back to this. Like, the reason why we have all of these issues is obviously because government doesn't enable for these issues to be solved, and they're not going to solve it themselves, because all of us know we have a corrupt government, and who knows how long that's going to take to fix. But they do have things that they can do now. And that would be enabling free markets to then operate. So enabling people who are already hosting these solutions, people who understand and are, professionals in installing water pipes, in installing infrastructure to go into these settlements. But the thing that we have in South Africa that's an issue is our government can't even process for half of these things to then be done. And for these organizations to go and operate in those areas, or for example, if someone has these ideas, then to be funded is one of the biggest problems we have. So I do think we have, like what Kamvo was saying, like a split divide. We have an elitist, society. We then have a middle class society, and we have completely rural, society. And actually 80% of the people in South Africa live within that rural segment. But we do have people who are offering solutions, and we have the people who are suffering. We just don't have that bridging gap, which is our government allowing those two to then coincide. And without saying too much, I'm just going to say, like, it really makes you think, why do we have a government that doesn't allow for the free market to then flow and then for the problems to solve each other? So to start off, question 3, my preface is just, if you were her, woman in power and the weight of legacy. So to start off with a quote, I have always said that power is not given to women, it must be taken. But once you get it, the real question is, what will you do with it? So South Africa has seen powerful women rise, from Winnie Mandela, who held communities together during apartheid, to Naledi Pandor, who has shaped our education and diplomatic policies with fierce intellect. But the glass ceiling hasn't yet shattered, it's just cracked. Women in politics and leadership are often judged more for their tone than their decisions, their marital status rather than their policies. They are told to be strong but not angry, visible but not too loud, feminist but not radical. So if you were in their shoes, balancing policy, party politics, and patriarchal criticism, what would your leadership look like? What values would shape your decisions? And how can we move from tokenism to transformation in women's leadership? So in essence, also, what would you do if you had the power but were a woman in power?
So the thing is, I think being a businesswoman, an entrepreneur, running this NGO, I think women put a lot of pressure on themselves. There's a lot of social pressure. We obviously have a lot more to prove within society, like especially. I mean, yes, women are out there, but it's still very dominated by men. We are always constantly being judged. We always have to worry about our appearance, otherwise we won't be taken seriously. We can't come across too friendly, else we are too friendly. We always have to be guarded in everything that we do. And I feel that because of this, we juggle too many balls, and eventually some of the balls start dropping.
Mm-hmm.
We don't only have the privilege of being businesswomen, but we constantly have to see to what's happening at home. And I think many of us neglect ourselves in many ways. So I feel that we need to create a culture where it's okay for women to show their weaknesses. Yes, we're excelling in every aspect of our lives, but I think we're failing when it comes to self-care. I think we should actually prioritize a little bit of self-care, prioritize that it's okay for women not to have everything together. We need to this is what I feel like. Yes, we've excelled, but to what extent that we've constantly neglect ourselves, and when we do, our kids, our families, a lot is at stake when we we're trying really hard, and I think we fail at some of the smaller things.
Yeah.
So I just feel like maybe we should focus on like emotional intelligence as well, where your self-care, your self-worth is we need to focus on those kind of things, just so that eventually we manage to keep all those balls in the air. That's what I think.
I agree. I think maintaining a sense of self-worth while you're pushing through the struggles of trying to achieve success, juggling family life, juggling all of the emotions and expectations that come with being a woman, coming out of that with, your self-worth intact is also something that needs to be spoken about and maybe worked on. So I do agree with that. Kamva, do you have anything to add or say?
Yes, I do. So when it comes to empowerment and us actually, breaking those glass ceilings and being able to achieve positions and find ourselves in spaces that, 20 years ago, people like ourselves wouldn't have found ourselves in. It's well and fine and it's amazing, but I think again, goes back to what we spoke about earlier when we speak about mindset. And now when we speak about mindset, we're also speaking about cultures. I think it's one thing to have women in positions of power. I think it's another to have women in positions of power and in enabling cultures that allow them to be women in those spaces and allow them to be people in those spaces. So not having to continuously prove yourself as a woman while you belong into that space. And I think those cultures that we are currently in within those spaces of power don't allow for that, they still very much patriarchal. They still very much expect women to assimilate to masculinity when you're in that role. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You still have expected to be dominant and, sort of the values and the characteristics that we associate with leadership, if you think about it, are all masculine, they're all masculine values and so forth, right? But it's so funny because then as a woman, you find yourself in a catch-22, It's either you assimilate to that and you sort of lose your femininity in the sense, or your personhood in the process, and you don't create a space where, as a woman ordinarily in that space, if you had to do it your own way, you'd have cultivated different cultures, you'd have cultivated different relationships with the people there. So you have that thing of saying, okay, you've isolated yourself from who you are as a person, but also you face judgment to say, oh, she thinks she's a man and this and that, and all of that. And then the flip side of it is to say, now you're going to a space and you lead in a way that is authentic to yourself and is authentic to who you are. And you still face judgment to say, oh, she's weak or she's that. This is why we don't have women in these spaces and so forth and so forth. So long as we change those cultures in the workspaces, it's still going to be a very difficult fight for people and women who find themselves in positions where they are to be celebrated and their achievements, but because of what you face, and also because now of the cultures, you don't even know how much of power those people have. You don't know if they're there because they're actually making a difference, or they're there because the company felt it would be good to have a woman or female executive.
Yeah.
So there's those things, and then furthermore, on top of that, again, gender-based violence is obviously a huge problem in South Africa. And I think in the workplace as well, yes, we might have HR, yes, we might have policies and workshops to sort of sensitize people to their professionalism in the workplace and so forth. But I don't think it's enough. The reason why I say I don't think it's enough is that women continuously find themselves in positions where they're not overtly harassed by men, but there's that, I think I'd say,
Implied.
yeah, so they're not directly harassed. So as a woman, when you're in that space, you don't know how to navigate, because it's not as easy as someone groping, your private area or something, but it's the comments, it's the attitudes, it's, putting you in corners and so forth that you don't know how to address. But at the same time, if you do address it, you don't want to be seen as that woman that, makes a big deal out of nothing. And it's such a difficult position to be in as a woman.
Yeah.
And there's all those issues that we still need to tackle when we speak about culture and we speak about mindset. We need transformative cultures in the workplace. We need transformative cultures in society in general, because if they're not in society in general, then they can't filter through to the workplace. Because what happens in the workplace is what happens in society. What happens in society is what happens in the workplace. So I think it's very important for us to cultivate cultures, transformative cultures for women to exist and be as the women that we are in whatever way, shape, and form we please to be. We want to be, because again, as a woman, it's not a homogenous thing. The way I'm a woman is not the same way Amirah will be a woman, the same way Thando will be a woman, and so forth. So we need to cultivate those open and transformative cultures, I think.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Thando.
I just wanted to add, though, that I think what we do need to put out there is that women need to take up space, and we need to enforce it in the youth that women need to take up space from a young age. You need to be able to put yourself out there, one, to be the leader, one, to be the one making a change, one, to put yourself as the CEO or as a president one day. I think our culture and our society really does limit women. It gives women the impression that all women are good for is birthing children, looking for the household and everything. And obviously with the feminist movement, we fought for equal rights for both women and men in the society. But I think it's very imperative that we motivate young women from a young age that, yes, you can go to school. Yes, you do deserve an education. You do deserve to take yourself out of that, disadvantaged community. You do deserve to have a life for yourself and outside of all these societal structures. So I do feel like in the new transformative thinking, the empowerment of young women is very, very important. Just to add into your answer, Amirah.
I like that. Not just transformation policies and funds, but a transformation mindset. I really like that.
I think the next question we're going to jump into is that we have been in 30 years of democracy, 31 years this year. And the country has obviously gone through a lot of change, and women have been a very big part of that struggle, a very big part of the constitutional change that has happened in South Africa. I think what we want to know from you guys is, what do you see for the future of South Africa as women? How important is our role in shaping this country and in advancing the constitution at the end of the day?
Okay, so if we're honest, we can't build a feminist future in South Africa without starting from the ground up. Realistically, our laws and policies, they sound progressive on paper, but in practice, they don't reach women who need them the most. I feel that we cannot expect rural women to take part in national dialogues when they still don't have running water, reliable clinics, access to effective and safe police stations and clinics, or even safe schools for their children. Their basic needs come first. Basic thing like sanitary pads would keep a kid away from school. And if we don't even have that, then I think worrying about the other stuff doesn't really matter. I think we need to hold the departments of health, education, infrastructure accountable when they fail to deliver services that are constitutional rights, not privileges.
I love that. I love it.
Yeah. So I think like we can think about a lot of stuff, but nothing's changed. And if people are struggling with basic things, I feel the government cannot do it alone as well. We have to encourage social responsibility, which is a continuous in empowering communities to become active citizens and demand accountability and to recognize their own value. I feel that when people feel their lives are valued, they can begin to humanize themselves in a system that has long dehumanized them. And yes, the future I want in 20 years is one where women in Guyana, Athlone, Soweto are not surviving but thriving. Girls are in school every day. Women have access to land and funding for their own projects, and communities are part of decision making. Change will not come from slogans, but from resources, water before Wi-Fi, clinics before conferences, dignity before dialogue. That was something I prepared early on because it's something that's really special. I mean, it's really close to my heart because I mean, if I'm living in the South, but I'm a rural girl. I grew up in rural Limpopo. My dad had a general dealer, and I literally, my friends were kids in the rural communities. I mean, that time when I was a kid, they would actually build their homes with, like, the cow dung, the
Yeah.
cement floors. Yes, so I mean, I've been there. I still go there. Yes, they have electricity. Yes, you see the satellite dishes. Yes, you see the Wi-Fi, but nothing else has changed.
Yeah. Aside from that, nothing else has actually gone in and helped them infrastructure wise. They still need, for example, when we moved out of Zanin in 2019, the need for boreholes, or what one borehole could do if it was dug in the vicinity of, a little, colony in the rural area, it changes everything for that whole area. So it just makes you sit and think, like, we have a government who can spend millions and millions on, you're saying conferences and all these other things that are happening, but why don't these people have basics? I think for me, it was like one experience that really told me so much about what I needed to know. And I also grew up in Zanin and the rural areas, but I think as I got older, it started to sink a lot deeper that we actually have a country where 80% of our population doesn't have food. So I went to the Charlotte Makeke Hospital, and we bumped into a lady, and we were giving out like food parcels, and she said she's so happy she bumped into us because today she had to decide on whether she can buy her kids food or pay for their taxi to take them to the hospital. And like, when you think about those kind of decisions that women have to make, it just makes you think, like, why do they not have their basics in place? And aside from that, as women who do have our basics then cared for, we still have so many struggles on top of that. So how can we then expect women coming from the rural areas who have nothing catered towards them to have, be meeting with corporates and then saying, okay, I can do this job and that job, when their basic, necessities can't even be fulfilled properly. Kamva, we would love to hear what you have to say as well.
Thank you, Amirah. I think when we speak about where I would like to see women in the next 20 years, or how I'd like to conceive of women and the feminist agenda in 20 years from now, honestly, it's just a matter of seeing women's rights as human rights. You like just mitigating the two, because I think the problem becomes where we have separated modalities of development. The minute we see women's rights as human rights, that's where we actually are able to, at every point, incorporate women empowerment in our development in every sector. So this can be in terms of rural development. We've spoken a lot about how women in rural communities are obviously disproportionately affected by the plight of being in a rural community generally. So we need to apply that gendered lens there. We need to say that the rights of people that we speak of when we speak about rural development must also necessarily pertain to the rights of women. So that's that. When we speak about employment as well, we need to have a gendered lens, and we need to say the rights of people when we speak about employment, whether it's in the cultures in the workplace, whether it's about attaining employment in the first place, they need to have a gendered lens. We need to understand the complexities of having a gendered lens and how it affects women and so forth. When we speak about education, again, we need to speak about accessibility to sanitary products for young ladies and young women within the education space. So when we speak about progressing and transforming education, we're not only speaking about the educational policies, we're not only speaking about the curriculum, but we must also speak about the experience.
Yeah.
We must also speak about the experience in the school environment, and we must also speak about how young boys are to act and are to be treated in contrast, and also vis-a-vis with young women as well. So we can't only speak, when we speak about education, we can't only speak about the curriculum, we can't only speak about infrastructure, but we also have to speak about the experience of the people within those schools, which is the young boys and the young girls, the gain applying a gendered lens. So for me, the minute we find synergy and the minute we find consistency in development and in our human rights approach, the minute we find the consistency and synergy with feminist values, that is when I can say we're making some progress. Because so long as we're still treating these things as two different things that operate in isolation, there's never going to be a point of convergence. So there's always be this, there's going to be us who are obviously propelling the advancement of women and so forth, but the government who actually has the funds and who can actually implement policies pulling in their own different direction that doesn't take us along. So we need to make sure that we have that convergence and consistently and systematically as well.
I wanted to say that you're so right, Kamvakazi. I think the intersectionality of gendered issues is intersected in every social issue, and it needs to be put that way. In, like you're saying, in education, in healthcare, in social development, in sustainability, women need to be at the front line of that because it is a gendered issue. And I mean, we need to look at issues such as a lot of women, I mean, in terms of healthcare education as well, sorry, that's just where I was trying to go, is that a lot of young women end up dropping out of school because they're the ones who then get pregnant and then have to take care of the kids and then end up being in the grant system, or end up having to give up their careers because then they have to take care of these kids. So also the issues when it obtains to social development with women and the girl child are very, very important and cannot be neglected by our government. And I loved what you said, that women's rights needs to be human rights. And actually, I think that actually should be a slogan, if anything, because we cannot be living in a democracy that is neglecting our women. We can't be living in a democracy 30 years after democracy where the GBV statistics are higher than we've ever seen it globally. So we have to focus on those elements and protect our women from, again, the ground up, to make sure that when we do need to see transformational change in the next 20 years, not only in our actions, but also in our mindset. And yeah, we really do need to just see that change. It's very, very important.
So what I was thinking is, so as much as we need to uplift the young girls and like teach them that it's okay, and teach them that it's okay, like give the values and empower them, we also need to teach the young boys the respect and support and how to treat women. We need positive role models for these kids. And once again, I feel that if we had like community development programs like these aftercare or these what would you call it, the entertainment, like these community centers. Yes, community centers to keep kids occupied, where we get funding from private companies, where they get government sort of gives them special rebates for starting these NGOs in rural communities, in general communities, even here in the informal settlements, just to keep the kids safe and out of trouble, and give them the positive influence that they need, so that when they get older, they already know, they've been exposed to positive influence as opposed to just what they've been exposed to at home. I think that would also make a difference.
Yeah, it's kind of like, do they know any other way? And then having to show them that it can be positive, you can create a life for yourself where you can have a safe space, you can, build it up for yourself. It doesn't just have to be, whatever they've been exposed to, which more often than not is the worst kind of things that we can think of. Thank you guys so much for those. So for our last question, in honor of Money Smart Week, we just thought of asking something finance related. So I'm just going to start off. In South Africa, women earn on average 30% less than men, yet more than 40% of households are headed by women, many of whom carry both income and caregiving responsibilities. In light of these realities, what attitude or approach should women adopt towards saving, investing, and managing money to build long-term financial resilience for themselves, and also just having kind of an education on finances from a younger age, so that even if it's, women that are not from rural areas, but women from our own communities, because I mean, I can maybe just speak for myself, like when we come of certain age, we're expected to get married, and when you do get married, you're then reliant on a husband. For those kinds of women, what kind of education can we maybe have in place for them to have an attitude towards saving and creating a financial safe haven for themselves once they put into those situations?
Okay, so this one here is really close to my heart. My husband passed about a year and a half ago. He just suddenly collapsed after running a 21-kilometer race. And whereas I was not an actual breadwinner, I didn't have many responsibilities. I had a husband that took care of me. It made me really think about the future of women, and it created a lot of dialogue with other people. It's been an eye opener for many women out there. Generally in within the community, women are the responsibility of their dads. Their dads will take care of them. You need money. What do you need? Let me give you this. We are in a culture where we will ask and then we are given, and then we never taught money responsibilities from a young age. And then we get married, and then we have our husbands. I'm speaking from a cultural perspective. We have our husbands who then are they take care of us. And I don't think enough effort is put into women taking care of themselves, because yes, many of us are in a situation like there's a lot of women out there who suddenly find themselves divorced, or their husbands dying, or they're victims of, they stay with these men in these horrible situations because they have no way of taking care of their children. They have no way of taking care of themselves. And I just feel we need to make more of an effort, not even not even women in the corporate field, but there's so many women that are stuck in abusive relationships because they have no way out. They are literally stuck. And I mean, I get messages all the time. My husband's on drugs. I have 2 kids, 7 and 1. I have nowhere to go. What do I do? Our girls need to be taught that they need to be taught from a young age to take care of themselves, because you don't want to wake up one day and find yourself in a situation where you're stuck. And many of them are living in these abusive relationships because they have no way out. So from this, I've started conversations. We need to teach our girls entrepreneurship skills from little. Not everyone's going to go to university. Not everyone's father's going to have the money to send them to college or to get an education. But we have to learn to teach them skills where they can take care of themselves, even and put food on the table without having to rely on anyone. And so this also goes back to community development. Putting serious effort, getting people who know about money, who know about finances, making sure that if you are getting married to somebody, he has your interest at heart. Because I was married to the most amazing man, but you guys are younger. Maybe it's advice to you as well. But I never saved because I assumed that my husband had everything in check. And then one day he closed his eyes and I was like, what is this? So ask all the questions, have these discussions. Like, I mean, when you get married, or even if you're on your own, don't rely on anyone. Make sure you can stand on your own 2 feet. That's my advice to anyone out there.
That's great advice. Thank you so much for that.
I just wanted to actually just jump in on this question, and I wanted to just give a bit of historical context. And I think, in terms of the economic system in South Africa, and especially for women, I feel like when we take into consideration our country's history, during apartheid, a lot of the men had to leave the rural areas and come to the urban areas to work. So a lot of women were then left to fend for themselves in the homesteads. And I guess that also led to the urbanization that we see today, meaning a lot of women then end up moving to the city and coming to live in the townships and, everything. But a lot of the time, South Africa has a big history of women-headed households where the women head the household. They make sure, the kids go to school, the money is divided, everyone is taken care of, and the men go out and they work. So I think there has been, even if it's been in the informal sector, kind of a pattern or a culture of women taking care of the economic sustainability of the household. And I'll speak, I guess, for the majority, the African household, where women, have to take care of the household because now they have the kids, the men are not there, so it's women-headed households. And I think this has also not necessarily given women a lot of economic freedom as well, because that burden has necessarily fallen on them. And especially in, like, I guess, the informal sector and informal, I guess, in the township, the economy is in the informal sector. There hasn't been true, economic liberation in those fronts, in allowing women to take charge of their finances and allowing them to know, like, the financial literacy to allow them to, have that financial relief. Because for so long, women have had to, without a choice, actually take care of the household and everything. And I think it's very important that we think of that, and we have to make sure that women, young people, know how to handle their finances, know how to save, because a lot of women in South Africa are left alone to take care of their kids. A lot of men, there isn't a big culture of men, I guess, sticking around to take care of their kids. So I like what Nadia is saying, that as women, we also do need to take that initiative and save and learn to take care of our livelihoods, because society most of the time leaves us destitute and leaves us to be that center of, the household.
I think I'm quite captured by your responses, both of you. And again, not to sound like a broken record, but when you guys speak, I concur with the sentiments, but I think again it goes back to that thing of seeing women's rights as human rights. So when we speak about that, when we look at economic development, for example, I think right now we can't really speak of saving, we can't speak of investments and so forth, because largely we have a hand-to-mouth culture currently in South Africa. So before we can speak about saving and so forth, we actually need to speak about the economic liberation of people. We need to speak about them actually being economically enhanced and advanced to even have means to save. Because I don't think, Thando, you spoke about how largely within the historical context as well, women were the ones who actually provided economic guidance to the household. They held it down, and you'll find that they had savings pockets that weren't obviously formal, but they knew that when it's this time of the month, maybe that the father, he loves to go drinking, whatever. So quickly they'll take a few hundreds of rands or whatever, hide it somewhere, store it, to know that when the month progresses and things are looking a bit tough, there's that money that's put aside and so forth. So in terms of the strategic and the way to think about savings and the economy, I don't think we're not well equipped in terms of how to go about it and the knowledge. Yes, there's definitely still much space to go into financial literacy for women and also for young people as well, largely. But I do think it's hard to speak about saving in an economy such as this. We need to speak about enabling people to grow financially before they're able to save. So yeah, I think that's something that's very important to look at, to say, are people or are women finding themselves in a position of being destitute because we don't know how to handle money, we don't know how to save and so forth, or women are destitute because there are no opportunities for them to even acquire funds in the first place, So yeah, I think that would be my input for this question. Thank you so much.
I think what all of you guys have said is where my mind's been going the past few weeks. My one thing that I keep thinking about is how can you then teach women what Nadia said, entrepreneurship skills, but let them apply it to where they are. And you know what's so nice about this is that if they do learn this, then those rural communities will grow because of the ripple effect that it will have. So for example, if a woman finds herself having 100 rand, like you gave the example, she kept aside a few hundred rands. Like you said, it's a hand to mouth kind of experience that we've been having. But if they do have even the slightest bit of saving mentality, it can kickstart them into then saying, okay, I'll save 100 rand every 2 months or whatever it is. How can I then take that 100 rand and turn it into 500 rand? Can I maybe bake a few cupcakes? Can I buy something and resell it? Or, teaching them those kind of entrepreneurship skills. Do I know people who need it in a certain area? When I go shopping, I can buy it for them and add a surcharge to it. I just think that by teaching them skills like that and how to make their money more is something that they will take from and then learn so much from it, and it will create a ripple effect, because when one woman sees another woman doing it, they will then learn from that. So even if it means having people who, there is currently people who go into the rural communities and teach them skills, but if you can imagine teaching them skills and leaning towards them and where they are at, taking what their situations are and making it better, or teaching them skills on how to deal with their current situations.
Just to quickly jump on that, I think, yes, it's very much important for us to upskill people and to teach people in certain communities and so forth. But I do think we must be cautious of, I think what I mentioned earlier, assuming a lack of knowledge on disadvantaged people, and then in doing so, assuming a lack of a knowledge on our end, so us being the custodians of knowledge. Because when we speak about savings and when we speak about women and so forth, women have been pioneers of saving and actually financial security for a very long time, before even formal structures of savings have even been something that have been mainstreamed in society.
Yeah.
We look at stokvels, for example. Women have, for the longest time, created a system to say, how do we together as a community ensure sustainability of our individual households? How do we take the little that we have to create more for our own individual households in a rotating manner, right? So when you look at those models and you look at those systems, we also look at, I know, for example, in my rural community, there is something called umasingwabane, which basically what it is, it's a funeral cover or funeral policy that operates within that community, within said people who participate in it, to say, this is how much we put, and when someone obviously faults, then they may be not covered, but when you do happen to pass away, this is how that money comes to the aid of the family, right? So I think we must be very wary of assuming a lack of knowledge on people, because it means. So ours is not to always impart knowledge, because imparting knowledge assumes that it's not there to begin with. And we then run the risk of also perpetuating elitist views on people that are marginalized and disadvantaged. But rather, I was just to say, how do we take systems that already exist and are already working for those people and enhance them further and help them and create enabling environments? Because there are knowledge systems, there are things that they are currently working. However, again, like I said, because we live in an economy that is not the most conducive for these things, it's difficult. So creating an enabling system and an enabling environment I think, would be priority over teaching people, because people have knowledge. People have in communities and working with their own systems for a very long time before we even picked up to say, oh, there's a problem here and here and here and so forth. So yeah, just wanted to put that as a closing remark, if I could say.
So how would you say we would create those enabling environments? Like what would
I think it goes back to looking at the economy to say we need to fix the economy. We need to hold states accountable for the things that they're lacking. So when we say that when we have a thriving economy and an economy that works, then people are able to continue with their systems. You know what I'm saying? They're able to participate and so forth and do those things. So for example, if I now I'm a young woman, let's say, and I have a family and I live in a rural community, right? And I participate in a stokvel every month with the other ladies in my community. However, on this particular day, I get retrenched from my company or from my place of work because of socioeconomic issues and so forth. I then am unable to sort of contribute to my monthly stokvel with everybody else because now I don't have an income. You know what I'm saying? I don't have income, or my income is although the household income now can't necessarily contribute to that. So us enabling an economy that thrives, that creates employment for people, that creates passive income and so forth for people, then they're able to contribute and continue with the systems that they have that already work for them and that already exist. But now when we don't look at these things together, we say, oh, let's teach these people in these communities how to do this, how to do that. But it doesn't take away from the fact that I actually still can't save from my job. You know what I'm saying? And I actually still can't save because I still don't have an income right now, and things like that. So us creating those enabling environments speaks to us ensuring that we hold the state accountable for what the mandate of the state is, and ensuring that the human right aspects is not lost. So we need to make sure that there's development, there's economic growth within society as a whole, because when there's economic growth, then we grow as individuals and we grow as communities as well.
So I just want to come in there. So, Kamvakazi, I obviously agree with what you said with the systems in place, but I honestly feel that we still don't know how to manage money. And it doesn't, when I say this, I don't mean people that have an education or are going to university. And yes, you're right. How do you manage money when you don't have money? This is the thing. So I'll give you an example. For instance, I know of students that have their moms are domestic workers. They've managed to really put their children through education, and they've like friends of my kids, and they finally get through and they study and they get through uni. What's the first thing they do? Is go and spend 15,000 rand or 10,000 rand on financing a car every month. I just feel like there's so much of pressure on our communities. Like it's like we don't realize like this. And if you lose your job, then what do you do? I feel like we have a culture of not knowing how to manage money, and you don't have to have a lot of money to know how to manage money. But for instance, I didn't know how to manage money either. I've only recently started saving because I didn't know how to manage money. We were not taught this growing up. I don't know if any of you know how to manage money, but it's something that we didn't have any money. I grew up not having a lot, so we didn't know how to save because the other people were always in charge. And we need to teach our girls how important it is from a young age. Teach them how to be independent, and this is the thing, not everyone's going to get an education. They need life skills. If you can sew, if you can cook, if you can bake, you have an opportunity to put food on the table. And that's what I feel, that's so important, more than education and more than getting a uni degree, because not everyone's going to get that degree. Not everyone's going to get an education. And I mean, there's lots of people within the community and like, oh, I'm struggling. How am I going to put food on the table? I'm like, can you bake? Can you cook? Can you sew? I mean, get a plumber, get someone at a community center, teach them basic plumbing skills. As long as you can do things with your hands, you'll be able to put food on the table. If COVID taught me anything, so many people were sitting at home. People were educated people that had no work. It was the people that knew basic life skills that could put food on the table in COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, there was that year where no one did anything. And so I just feel like, let's go back to the basics. Let's learn things. Like, I mean, I have a 12-year-old. I'm getting her to do everything that she needs. Like, she must bake, she must cook, she must sew, she wants to learn carpentry. She must do everything, because we not all, unfortunately, not everyone's going to get a formal education. And so it's important to empower our kids to be able to take care of themselves, because if they're not going to go to uni, then how are they going to support themselves? Are they going to like do the wrong thing?
Yeah.
No, completely. I think also, if we're looking at the patriarchal society, it doesn't allow, like you're saying, Nadia, women necessarily to have a stand in the economic, well-being of the household, of the family, of even just themselves. So I think with patriarchy, and I think across in the patriarchal structure, across the board, across the class structure, women then will marry and then let their husbands necessarily be the ones who then handle the finances, the housing, everything. And then we then, like you're saying, neglect empowering ourselves or upskilling ourselves in that sense. But I do think that sometimes we also do have to look at, I know in a lot of indigenous cultures and with indigenous people, the women are the ones who then, hold the authority, make the decisions and everything. And I think that's how we need to also implement that in our transformative thinking and changing our mindsets, and that women have the agency as well to, gain their own skills, make their own money, handle
Yeah.
needs to be handled as well. So it's just, I think, all those differences in terms of what women can do and what women know they can do. And it's just about, I think, us empowering women, not just us, but it's the government's
Mm.
responsibility as well to provide economic liberation for women so that they can survive and then get these constitutional freedoms in which, everyone has fought for. So I think women do need to take that agency. And I mean, I hear what Kamvakazi is saying. It's difficult, especially in disadvantaged communities, to speak about saving and investing if you're living in an informal settlement and you can't even open a bank account. That's why the informal stock files and stuff end up becoming the ways of saving, because then women as well need to then understand that, oh my gosh, the culture is just so unstable. When everyone gets paid, everyone wants to go and drink. So we have to put money away in the system to make sure that there's food on the table in the middle of the month. So I do feel like women have been taking the agency for economic freedom within their households and for themselves for a long time. But you're completely right in saying that women need to take their own agency in upskilling ourselves and knowing that we have the power to make sure that we are also okay. We cannot just depend and be oblivious in this patriarchal system, because unfortunately it's not for women. So we need to kind
Yeah.
of take it for ourselves. Yeah.
I think we also have to be mindful all the time of like lifting each other up. It's well and good that I'm okay and I'm taken care of and my own household is taken care of, but we have to be social beings where we worry about the next person. So I have like I have a whole lot of ladies that do like temporary work for me, and no one has a bank account, and some of them are afraid to open up a bank account because if they show that they have money in their account, they're not going to get the social grant. So many of them are afraid to open up to have money in the account. So I started something on my WhatsApp group because I'm like really passionate about them saving. And even though like they work temporarily, but I mean, some of them have been giving me, we have the savings group where they actually post, one of the ladies is in charge and like they'll deposit like 200 Rand a week each one. The one lady's got like almost like 4,500 Rand from January. That's a lot of money. And I mean, if she carries on like this till December, she's going to have at least a decent amount of money by the end of the year. So the thing is, it's not just about us. We all should try in our own capacity to uplift those around us. It's no sense you giving a salary to your staff every month and saying, okay, fine. Now, how are you saving? What are you doing? You need to be doing this, 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 and at least try. Like you have to try and like save some money. So I also feel like we have to be better social beings and try and help those around us as well. It's no sense we benefiting and then the people around us that are not benefiting.
It was so lovely having you guys here, and thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on just, on this in this Women's Month. And we really appreciate your perspectives and just your input as a whole. So thank you so much for participating in this roundtable.